There's a little town in Pennsylvania where, for years, almost no one under 65 had a heart attack. No heart disease. Barely any. And when the doctors went looking for the reason, everything they expected to find wasn't there. These people smoked. They ate sausage fried in lard. Nearly half their calories came from fat. They didn't jog. They weren't thin. By every rule of medicine, their hearts should have been failing. Instead, one investigator put it simply, these people were dying of old age. That's it. So what was keeping them alive? It wasn't the food. It wasn't the genes. It was something no one had thought to look at. And once you see what it was, you'll never look at a self-made success the same way again, including the most famous rule this book ever gave the world. The doctor who cracked Rosetta was named Stuart Wolf, and it took him years to accept his own answer. The town's secret wasn't inside the townspeople at all. It was between them. 3 generations under one roof. 22 civic clubs in a town of 2,000. Neighbors who stopped to talk on every porch. The community itself was the medicine. And that is the idea that quietly detonates this entire book. We love the story of the person who rises from nothing. The lone genius who did it all himself. Malcolm Gladwell wants to prove that person does not exist. People don't rise from nothing, he writes. The ones who stand before kings look self-made, but they are always the beneficiaries of hidden advantages. So stop asking what successful people are like. Start asking where they're from. Start with something that looks like pure talent, elite Canadian hockey. Line up the best junior players in the country and a bizarre pattern falls out. 40% of them were born in January, February, or March. Almost none in the last 3 months of the year. These are the most talented teenagers in a hockey-mad nation, and the calendar is sorting them like a machine. Why? Because Canada's cutoff for youth hockey is January 1st. A boy born in January is almost a full year older than a teammate born in December. And at 10 years old, that's the difference between big and small, coordinated and clumsy. The coach, watching a 9-year-old, thinks he's spotting talent. He's actually spotting a birthday. And that tiny accidental edge is about to snowball into something enormous. Here's how the snowball rolls. The bigger kid gets picked for the all-star team. The all-star team means a better coach, better teammates, and 50 extra games a season. So he practices 2-3 times as much. And by 13, he really is better. Not because he was born gifted, because he was born in the right month, and the system quietly fed him for years. Sociologists call it a cumulative advantage. Gladwell names it after a line in the Bible. To those who have, more will be given. The good get a small head start, and that head start compounds into a lead that looks like destiny. As Gladwell puts it, the player becomes a genuine outlier. But he didn't start out an outlier. He started out just a little bit better. So hold that thought, and let's aim it at the one number everyone thinks they know about success. In a music academy in Berlin, researchers split violinists into 3 groups: the merely good, the future teachers, and the elite. Then they added up the lifetime hours each had practiced. The pattern was ruthless. By age 20, the elite had each logged around 10,000 hours. The good ones, 8,000. The teachers, 4. No naturals who floated to the top on talent. No grinds who practiced and never made it. Just hours. Researchers landed on what they called the magic number for true expertise, 10,000 hours. That's the line the whole internet remembers. That's the poster on the wall. But almost everyone remembers it wrong because Gladwell's actual point is the exact opposite of just work harder. Watch. 10,000 hours is enormous. Do the math. It's practicing something for years, every single day, before you're even a grown adult. And here's the catch Gladwell drives home. It is all but impossible to reach that number by yourself. You need parents who push you. You need to not be poor, so you're not working a job after school. You need to be handed a rare, early, unusual opportunity and be there at the exact moment it appears. So the 10,000-hour rule was never a promise that effort alone makes you great. It's the opposite. It's proof that behind every self-made master is a door somebody else left open. And once you know to look for that door, you start seeing it everywhere. Take Bill Joy, one of the founding fathers of the internet. The legend is genius. A kid so brilliant he practically willed himself into computing history. The reality is a hallway in Michigan. Joy showed up at the University of Michigan in 1971, 16 years old, at one of the only schools on Earth with a modern time-sharing computer center. Then he stumbled onto a glitch in the billing system, a bug that let him program for free all night as long as he wanted, while everyone else was rationed by the hour. So he did. For years. Ask him to add it up, and he pauses. Maybe 10,000 hours? That's about right. The talent was real, but without that one building, that one bug, that one moment in history, the hours never happen. Now the most self-made name of all, Bill Gates. College dropout, richest man in the world, built it with his bare hands. That's the story. Here's what the story leaves out. Gates went to a private school that, in 1968, when almost no university had one, bought a direct link to a mainframe computer. A 13-year-old with unlimited access to a machine most grown engineers had never touched. In one 7-month stretch, he ran up 1,500 hours of computer time, 8 hours a day, 7 days a week. By the time he dropped out of Harvard, he was way past 10,000 hours. And the first words out of his mouth when Gladwell interviewed him? "I was very lucky." He knows. The question is why the rest of us forgot. The Beatles got their 10,000 hours too, in the strip clubs of Hamburg, Germany, where a fluke booking forced them to play 8 hours a night, hundreds of nights in a row. By their first hit, they'd already performed live an estimated 1,200 times. Most bands never play 1,200 times in a career. But notice the pattern hiding under all of them. Joy, Gates, the Beatles. It isn't just hours, it's when. Nearly every American software titan was born within a year or two of 1955, perfectly aged to be hungry teenagers the exact year the personal computer arrived. Go back further. 14 of the richest people in all of human history were born in the same narrow decade of the 1830s, right as America built its railroads and industry. Being a genius helps. Being a genius at the right moment is everything. Now, a fair warning, because Gladwell's whole book is a case for honesty about how success works. That famous 10,000-hour number? It's been fiercely debated ever since. The researcher whose study it came from argued Gladwell simplified it, that 10,000 was an average for one elite group, not a magic threshold, and that how you practice matters as much as how long. Gladwell himself leaves the door open, admitting the numbers can't explain why some people get more out of the same hours than others. So don't take the figure as a law of physics. Take the deeper claim, the one the critics never really dented. Nobody reaches the top alone, and to see how far that goes, meet the smartest man you've never heard of. His name is Chris Langan, and his IQ is around 195. Einstein's was 150. As a child, he taught himself to read, tore through complex philosophy, and once took the SAT and fell asleep during it, and still aced it. On a TV quiz show, they called his intelligence literally off the charts, too high to measure. If raw brain power decided success, Chris Langan would be a household name. Instead, for much of his life, he worked as a bar bouncer. He developed a sweeping theory of the universe that no university would touch. The smartest man in America couldn't get anyone to open a door for him. And that is the crack in the myth we tell about geniuses. Because it turns out being brilliant and being successful are not the same thing at all. A century ago, a psychologist named Lewis Terman went hunting for genius. He tested 250,000 children and handpicked nearly 1,500 with sky-high IQs. His termites, he called them, certain he'd found America's future leaders. He tracked them for life, and the results humiliated him. Most became perfectly ordinary. Not one won a Nobel Prize. Worse, his scouts had actually tested 2 boys, turned them away for scoring too low, and both later won the Nobel. Here's why. Beyond a certain point, an IQ of around 120, extra intelligence simply stops paying off. Past that line, a scientist with a normal smart mind is just as likely to win the Nobel as one with a towering one. Being smart enough is the threshold. What decides the rest is something IQ tests never measure. Watch 2 geniuses hit the same wall. As a graduate student, Robert Oppenheimer, the man who'd later build the atomic bomb, tried to poison his tutor and attempted poisoning. His punishment? Probation and some sessions with a psychiatrist. He talked his way out of it. Years later, he talked his way into running the most important scientific project on the planet. Chris Langan, meanwhile, once lost a full scholarship because his mother missed a form, and no amount of pleading could move the officials. One man bent institutions to his will. The other couldn't get a class rescheduled. The difference wasn't IQ. It's what Gladwell calls practical intelligence, knowing how to read a room, ask for what you want, work the system, and nobody is born with it. You're taught it at the family dinner table growing up. A sociologist followed families across social classes and found two whole different ways of raising a child. Wealthier parents run what she called concerted cultivation. They schedule, negotiate, and coach their kids to question authority and speak up to adults. Poorer families love their children just as fiercely, but let them grow on their own and quietly teach them to defer, to stay out of the way of powerful people. Neither child is smarter, but one walks into the world entitled to ask for more and gets it. Oppenheimer was raised to command a room. Langan was raised to keep his head down. So the self-made genius was, once again, made, not by his own mind, but by the invisible advantages handed to him as a boy. And that's only half of Gladwell's argument. The other half reaches back centuries. Meet Joe Flom, for a while, the most powerful lawyer in New York. Son of poor Jewish immigrants, shut out of every prestigious white shoe firm in the 1950s because of who he was. So he took the only work those firms sneered at: hostile takeovers, corporate raids. Grubby, they said. Beneath them. Then the 1970s came. The corporate raid became Wall Street's main event, and Flom was the only man in the city who'd spent 20 years mastering it. His disadvantage had been an apprenticeship in disguise. And it wasn't luck alone. He was born in a demographic dip, a small generation with empty classrooms and open doors, to garment worker parents who did the kind of hard, meaningful work that teaches a child effort pays off. Remember Gladwell's line, "No one, not rock stars, not billionaires, not even geniuses, ever makes it alone." Now Gladwell turns from opportunity to something stranger, the legacies we inherit without knowing. A town in the Kentucky mountains, Harlan, spent generations tearing itself apart in blood feuds. Family against family, sons avenging fathers, over insults most people would shrug off. Why there? Because the mountains were settled by herdsmen from the borderlands of Britain, and a man whose whole wealth is livestock that can be stolen in the night learns to answer the smallest challenge with force or lose everything. That reflex is a culture of honor, and it outlived the herds by centuries. Researchers proved it still lives. Insult a young man from the South in a lab, and his body floods with stress hormones. A northerner just laughs it off. 300 years later, the grandfather's world was still firing inside the grandson's blood. Legacies don't ask permission, and the next one gets people killed. For a stretch of the 90s, one airline crashed at 17 times the rate of its safest rivals. The planes were fine. The pilots were well trained. What was wrong was buried in something invisible, the way they spoke to each other. Listen to the black box tapes of a crash and you hear it. An exhausted captain making a fatal mistake, and a junior co-pilot who sees it coming, but can only hint. He softens it. "Don't you think it's raining more?" When what he means is, "We are about to die. Turn around." Linguists call it mitigated speech, sugarcoating a warning so you don't challenge your superior. In cultures with steep respect for authority, a subordinate physically cannot bring himself to shout at the boss, even as the mountain fills the windshield, and the plane goes down, carrying everyone with it. Now, this is a heavy, contested claim, and Gladwell knows it. Critics warn it flirts with stereotyping, and even the report he leans on was attacked as unfair. Gladwell says as much on the page. He's uneasy making it. But here's why he tells it anyway. Because of what happened next. The airline didn't fire its pilots or call them hopeless. A new manager did something radical. He made English the only language in the cockpit. In English, freed from the steep hierarchy baked into their mother tongue, the co-pilots became different people, able to speak plainly, to push back, to save the plane. And the crashes stopped. The airline's record became spotless. That's the hope hiding inside the whole book. A legacy that endangers you can be rewritten. Where you're from is powerful, but it is not a sentence. Cross the world to a rice paddy. Growing rice is nothing like a Western wheat field. It's ferociously precise, skilled work, some 3,000 hours a year of it, where a little more care yields a little more rice every single season. For centuries that bred a proverb into whole cultures. No one who can rise before dawn 360 days a year fails to make his family rich. Now, why are children in those same countries famously strong at math? Not some inborn gene, Gladwell insists. He flatly rejects that. It's the paddy's inheritance, the belief that effort, stubbornly applied, always pays. A researcher found something wild. Rank countries by how many boring survey questions their students bother to finish, and you get the exact same order as their math scores. Persistence is the talent, and that changes what we owe every child. In the South Bronx, a public school called KIPP took kids by lottery, 90% poor from the toughest blocks, and sent more than 80% of them to college. How? Not a secret method, just more time. Because someone finally studied the achievement gap and found the shock. During the school year, poor kids learn as fast as rich kids. The gap only opens over summer, when wealthy kids keep learning and poor kids fall behind. The problem was never the children. It was that, for them, there simply wasn't enough school. Meet Marita, 12 years old. She wakes at 5:45, rides in for a long day, does homework until 11 at night, and gives up the childhood her old friends still have. Is that a lot to ask of a child? It is. It's a bargain. Her present traded for a future nobody was going to hand her. Then, at the very end, Gladwell turns the lens on himself. His own mother rose out of rural Jamaica because a village grocer once extended her family credit because riots in 1937 pried open new scholarships. And, he admits without flinching, because his ancestors had lighter skin in a society that rewarded it. His success, his book, his voice in your ears, all of it rides on doors held open generations before he was born. The outlier, he writes, is not an outlier at all. The man who says, "I did this all by myself," is telling a story that has never once been true. Not for Gates, not for the Beatles, not for Joe Flom, not for Gladwell, and not, if we're honest, for any of us. So go back to Roseto, the town whose secret was never in the people, but in what surrounded them. That's the whole book in one image. We treat success like a heart attack we blame on the individual, his talent, his grit, his choices. Gladwell's answer is that success, like health, is something a community grows. It is, he writes, a gift. Outliers are those who were handed opportunities and had the strength to seize them. Which lands us on the uncomfortable, hopeful thought he leaves you with. If a single lucky break, a good birthday, one open door can turn an ordinary child into an outlier, then how many outliers are we throwing away, simply by not opening the door? The world could be so much richer than the one we've settled for, because no one, not one of us, ever makes it alone. And that means the machinery of greatness is something we could choose to build for far more people, starting with the next child we decide to bet on.